Cause, a principle, aim, or movement that because of a deep commitment, one is prepared to defend or advocate. Karibu. Karibu is a Kiswahili word that means welcome. Welcome, you found yourself in a peaceful place, a place where you can grow and develop, and we hope grow and develop to your fullest potential. This is a podcast that we hope will expand your mind and raise your consciousness. Welcome to The Cause, conversations on music, history, and democracy. If there is no struggle, there is no progress. Those who profess to favor freedom and yet depreciate agitation are people who want crops without plowing up the ground. They want rain without thunder and lightning. They want the ocean without the awful roar of its waters. This struggle may be a moral one, or it may be a physical one, or it may be both moral and physical, but it must be a struggle. Power concedes nothing without a demand. It never did, and it never will. Frederick Douglass. Today's episode is titled Radical Democracy, Power to the People. What if democracy wasn't just a ballot box every 4 years? What if it meant everyday people having real, direct power over the systems that shape their lives? Work, housing, education, policing. I could go on. That's the promise and the provocation of radical democracy. But what is it? Where does it come from? And why are so many grassroots movements today turning to its ideas? In the title for our podcast is the word democracy. This show, this very special episode, is devoted to democracy, but not just any form of democracy, because there are lots of different forms of democracy. This is a show about radical democracy. There's a lot of people running around talking about democracy. And I just want to say very calmly, if this is democracy, we obviously need something more, something else. For the next 35 to 40 minutes to 45 minutes, let's reimagine democracy. Let's remix democracy. Let's radicalize democracy. Welcome to the Cause Podcast, special edition on radical democracy, on what it means to give power to the people. Today we're talking about radical democracy. And at its core, radical democracy isn't just about expanding participation in existing systems. It's about transforming them. Transforming them. Extending and expanding them, making them real and relevant to our time, to our problems. It's one of the ways that we can develop solutions, collective solutions to our collective problems. This notion of a radical democracy. Whereas liberal democracy is based on elections, representative government, and individual rights. Radical democracy? Radical democracy emphasizes ongoing political struggle. That means it never stops. I want you to think back to that epigraph that I started this episode with by Frederick Douglass. Ongoing struggle. Radical democracy also entails collective empowerment, not just power for some, the people with the money, the big dollars, but it's power for everybody, collective empowerment. It also involves decentralized decision-making, and the idea that democracy is never finished. It's something that we have to fight for and create every day, without fail. It's radical in the original sense of the word, meaning from the root. It asks, who really has power and how can we change that? Now imagine if everybody listening to this show really meditate for a moment on those questions. Who really has power and how can we change that? Things we really need to get hip to is this whole notion of radical democracy is not new. Don't let the term radical scare you. We're just talking about from the roots. It's more or less us saying we need to go back to the fundamentals. And the fundamentals of this whole notion of a radical democracy can be traced back to, let's say, ancient Egypt and also ancient Greece and Rome. It goes all the way back to those classical civilizations. And that's what made them civilizations and not barbarity, was a commitment to democracy. So we can trace its roots back to those classical civilizations. We've just said Egypt, we've said Greece and Rome, but more significantly to modern movements and thinkers who challenged capitalist, colonialist, racist, and patriarchal systems. This leads us to really spend some time with Frederick Douglass. For Frederick Douglass, he emphasized that democracy must include the disenfranchised. Douglass argued that a democracy that excluded African Americans was a contradiction in terms. That's not a real democracy. If you're excluding African Americans or Native Americans or Asian Americans or Latinx folks or women or queer folks and trans folks, that's not democracy. We need to get clear on what it is that we're talking about. Frederick Douglass insisted on universal suffrage, including for African Americans, for women, for Native Americans, Asian Americans, Latinx folks. He said that this was essential to any legitimate democratic project. Now, again, some people have very illegitimate conceptions and projects of democracy. Oh, wow. But Douglass wanted a radically inclusive democracy, a multiracial democracy, a democracy that was not a patriarchal democracy. In fact, it was Douglass who said a government that cannot and does not protect the humblest citizen in their right to vote is a government of despotism, not democracy. Douglass also emphasized struggle is essential to progress. I'm going to say that one more time. Struggle is essential to progress. That means that all the people that are scared of struggle, they don't really want democracy. Douglass understood democracy as a site of struggle, not a given, a site of struggle. His famous dictum, if there is no struggle, there is no progress, frames democracy not as static, but as something forged through collective resistance. Douglass also emphasized radical equality as a democratic ideal. He advocated for radical egalitarianism. So not only civil rights, but equal opportunity in labor, education, and citizenship. For Douglass, democracy required dismantling the racial caste system embedded in post-slavery America. This is Frederick Douglass. So we're talking about one of the greatest abolitionists in the history of the United States of America. And his conception, having been enslaved, his conception of a radical democracy means he's basically saying if these folks are going around saying that America is a democracy and you have all of these enslaved people, obviously we need more than their conception of democracy. Deeply influenced by Douglass, now we fast forward to W.E.B. Du Bois. We all know that Frederick Douglass was Du Bois's idol. And so, to a certain extent, Du Bois is going to extend and expand Frederick Douglass's conception of radical democracy. For Du Bois, democracy demands economic justice. Du Bois viewed political democracy as hollow without economic democracy. So I hope you see already we are emphasizing that there are many different kinds of democracy. I wish more American citizens would become fluent in the various conceptions of democracy. We've talked about liberal democracy. Du Bois is bringing up political democracy and then economic democracy. This is really important. But let me go back and get that. Du Bois viewed political democracy as hollow without economic democracy. He believed in the redistribution of wealth and public ownership of key resources, stating that real democracy requires control over both production and governance. I'm going to quote W.E.B. Du Bois. This is one of my favorite quotes by Du Bois. He said, "There is no perfect democracy short of complete economic and social equality." Du Bois also emphasized that the color line, by which he means racism, the color line undermines democracy. Du Bois's concept of the color line revealed how race structured American life. He showed how white supremacy made a mockery of democratic claims, especially in the South, where African Americans were disenfranchised, and it was their disenfranchisement was systematic and violent. This is really powerful. Continuing to build on Frederick Douglass's conception of democracy, Du Bois emphasized radically inclusive democracy. And he said that a real radical democracy is driven by education, culture, and political resistance. So if it's a real free and open society, everybody should have access to education. In fact, education is a fundamental human right. Insofar as W.E.B. Du Bois is concerned, he also emphasized the importance of political dissent. If you're in a real democratic society, you have freedom of speech, you have academic freedom, you have freedom of religion, you have every imaginable form of freedom in a truly democratic society. Du Bois also said, so long as it's not causing social injury, people have a right to a multiplicity of freedoms. And now from Du Bois and Douglass, we go to Martin Luther King Jr. One of my idols. It was Dr. King who emphasized that democracy requires nonviolent mass action. So notice that his conception of nonviolence is not passive. Democracy requires nonviolent mass action. King's theory of nonviolence wasn't passive. It was radical democratic participation. And this is something, as we know, that he was influenced by Ella Baker, the great Ella Baker, who emphasized participatory democracy. She says you're not really living in a democracy if the collective is not participating in the upbuilding of that democracy. If there's anybody that is blocked, Ella Baker says, anybody that is blocked from participating for whatever reason, that's a sham democracy. That's not a real democracy. So again, we can't talk about Martin Luther King Jr. without talking about the enormous influence of Ella Baker on Martin Luther King Jr.
Ghetto took place 25 years ago. Someone has said that those who fail to remember history may live to experience history. What I am suggesting is that the trend towards repressive measures against those who are resisting the war, those who are resisting the racist repressions, those who are resisting the poverty that they endure, those who are challenging a system, more and more the repression is stepped up in terms of what? Eliminating those people in one way or the other, containing them. Rap Brown was sent to jail not because he had been tried and found guilty of a crime, but because he was an easy target. And if we take the position that, sure, I don't believe in that kind of imprisonment, but you must remember what he said, then we aren't really understanding that the real issue is repression. Not repression for whom, but repression against anyone who violate for who is exercising what we say are our constitutional rights of freedom of speech.
This is really key because Dr. King, Martin Luther King, he believed civil disobedience exposed injustice and forced the state to live up to its democratic ideals. He talked about dramatizing suffering and the pain that a lot of African Americans were living under during the civil rights movement. He extended that to poor people, and that's why he had the Poor People's Campaign and the Poor People's March. This is really, really important to understand that it's not a black thing. So whoever is disenfranchisement and democracy don't mix. That's the point. I'm just going to make it plain for you. You cannot have a real democracy with disenfranchisement. You can't block people. You can't dominate and discriminate against people. That's not, I don't know, that's some kind of other, something else. I think that they should stop bastardizing the word democracy then. That's something else. And it was Martin Luther King Jr. challenging America to embrace its democratic ideals. He said a riot is the language of the unheard. These are the folks that feel that they are invisible, or they in fact are invisible in mainstream American society. So they rebel, right? He urged not silence, but organized moral confrontation with unjust systems. The next point that Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. emphasized, he said, democracy must be racially and economically inclusive. We can clearly see he's carrying that point over from one of his intellectual idols, W.E.B. Du Bois. Democracy must be racially and economically inclusive. And if you want me to remix it for the 21st century, it's also got to be inclusive of gender and sexuality. A real radical democracy is against patriarchy. It is against heterosexism, queerphobia, and transphobia. I'm talking about a democracy for the 21st century. So Martin Luther King Jr. said that democracy must be racially and economically inclusive, building on W.E.B. Du Bois. And in Where Do We Go From Here, his 1967 classic, one of my favorite books by Martin Luther King is called Where Do We Go From Here? And in that book, King advocated for a guaranteed income, labor rights, and affordable housing. Now, that was 1967, and we still need that today. Imagine if they had listened and really took heed to the words of Martin Luther King. Not just the I Have a Dream speech, but what about this 1967 classic book, Where Do We Go From Here? Where he's emphasizing guaranteed income, labor rights, and affordable housing.
A program, and I can't stay on this long, that will drive the nation to a guaranteed annual income. Now, early in the century, this proposal would have been greeted with ridicule and denunciation as destructive of initiative and responsibility. At that time, economic status was considered the measure of the individual's abilities and talents. And in the thinking of that day, the absence of worldly goods indicated a want of industrious habits and moral fiber. We've come a long way in our understanding of human motivation and of the blind operation of our economic system. Now we realize that dislocations in the market operation of our economy and the prevalence of discrimination thrust people into idleness and bind them in constant or frequent unemployment against their will. The poor are less often dismissed, I hope, from our conscience today by being branded as inferior and incompetent. We also know
he saw poverty and racism as interconnected barriers to authentic democracy. I would add patriarchy and heterosexism are also barriers to authentic democracy in the 21st century. Oh. And then this last part from Martin Luther King in terms of his conception of a radical democracy. A radical democracy is predicated on radical love. A radical democracy is committed to building the beloved community. King's vision of the beloved community was democratic at its core. It is a society organized around justice, equal participation, mutual care, and solidarity. Not just legal rights, but transformed social, political, cultural relationships. So a real democracy is transformative. It's not just a political ideal. There's also a morality. There's moral ideals attached to a radical democracy. And so now we've been talking about Frederick Douglass, W.E.B. Du Bois, and Martin Luther King Jr.'s conception of radical democracy. They all agreed. Democracy is not just a system, but a practice of resistance, reinvention, and radical inclusion. I repeat, for Frederick Douglass, W.E.B. Du Bois, and Martin Luther King Jr., democracy is not just a system, but a practice of resistance, reinvention, and radical inclusion.
Are you ready to dive deep into the rich histories, cultures, and arts of Africa and the African diaspora? At the Center for African and African American Studies, affectionately known as The Cause, we're leading the way in research, arts, and student engagement at the University of Colorado, Boulder. The Cause is more than just a research center. It's a space where students, faculty, artists, allies, and activists come together to explore African and African American experiences, from historical legacies to modern cultural expressions. And at the heart of it all, our students, playing a central role in everything we do. They're the future of this important cultural legacy, working side by side with faculty on groundbreaking projects and events that impact not just the campus, but the community and wider world. Research projects and events that impact not just our beloved CU campus, but the community and world at large.
Our mission? To foster academic excellence, social responsibility, and artistic expression, with programs that inspire leadership and advocacy for social justice. Whether you're interested in visual arts, music, or deepening your understanding of African American culture, The Cause is the place for you.
But we can't do it alone. The Cause relies on the generous support of our community to continue making a difference. By giving to the Center for African and African American Studies, you help us expand research, create opportunities for artists, support our students, and drive meaningful social change. And right now, your gift will go even further. All donations will be matched by CU Boulder Chancellor Justin Swartz for up to $1 million or until May 30th, 2026. To make your impact today, visit colorado.edu/center/cause and click on Support the Cause. Every contribution, large or small, brings us closer to a future of unity, knowledge, and transformation.
So, if you're looking for a community where history, culture, and creativity converge, visit the Center for African and African American Studies at CU Boulder. Come join The Cause and be a part of a movement for unity, knowledge, and social change.
Learn more and give today at colorado.edu/center/cause. We can't wait to welcome you to The Cause.
We've spent some time discussing basically a mini history of radical democracy, emphasizing conceptions of radical democracy coming from Frederick Douglass, W.E.B. Du Bois, and Martin Luther King Jr. So now that we have the history and some of the theory, it's important for us to move into a conversation, a discussion about radical democracy in action. You see, theory is one thing, practice is another. Let's look at a few moments where radical democracy became real. Obviously, we can start with the civil rights movement between 1954 and about 1968. And groups like the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, SNCC, they called for participatory democracy, giving people not just a vote, but a voice and power in shaping decisions. This is really, really key. There are so many organizations from the civil rights movement that I believe embody radical democracy. From there, we could also talk about the women's liberation movement of the 1960s and the 1970s. And to be precise, most people would sort of periodize the women's liberation movement between 1967 and 1979. And again, you're talking about challenging this whole notion of a patriarchal democracy, a masculinist democracy. The reality of the matter is that for most of the history of our country, women have not or did not have the right to vote. Women did not achieve the right to vote until 1920. How people were running around saying that America was a democratic society when half the country could not vote, I need for you to think about that. I need for you to kind of pay some attention right now. This is a love letter to you, right? And a love letter to progressive people. We can't be tricked by people saying that we live in a democracy. No. It was John Rawls, the great political philosopher, who said that it doesn't really matter if the people are living in democracy. What matters more is if you can make them think that they're living in democracy. Now I want you to go back to your high school days. There are a lot of people who graduate from high school, they graduate from college, they graduate with master's degrees and PhDs, and they couldn't even define what democracy is and what it is supposed to be. That's intentional. See, this podcast is a consciousness-raising podcast. We need to begin to ask some serious, critical questions about what democracy is and what it ought to be. What democracy is and what it could be, what it should be. And I believe we ought to be about the business of completely reimagining, reinventing democracy. When we start talking about radical democracy in action, in real action, we could also talk about the Zapatistas, and Chiapas, Mexico. They built a community-based governance system rooted in indigenous traditions, rejecting both neoliberal capitalism and state socialism. The Zapatistas, you see, powerful. We have some examples right here in the Western Hemisphere of people that are attempting to bring radical democracies into being. And again, they're not perfect. Du Bois even said that, again, those people searching for perfection, a perfect democratic society, they've smoked something strong or something. They've drunk they've drunk a little too much or something. The point isn't for perfection, but are we in the process of developing a democracy that we fine-tune to the 21st century? And there's a lot of folks who just they throw up their hand. They don't want to hear that D word, democracy, right now, because so many people have abused and misused it. We could go on from the Zapatistas and talk about Occupy Wall Street at its best. Around 2011, Occupy Wall Street. It was famous for the chant, "This is what democracy looks like." This is what democracy looks like. Occupy Wall Street. Wow. No leaders, no hierarchy, just assemblies, collective decision-making, and radical horizontal leadership. This is powerful if you think about it. Here's an example from 2011, circa. We've got some things going on. And then last but certainly not least, the Black Lives Matter movement. The Black Lives Matter movement. Not just a protest, but a demand to redefine public safety, community, and justice. Its decentralized structure echoes radical democratic ideals. And that powerful slogan, no justice, no peace. No justice, no peace. No peace. No justice, no peace. To redefine public safety. We're all safer when folks can drive and walk and be in their own apartments without being shot down and slaughtered and mutilated. Something is wrong with that kind of society. So public safety, really, really important here. And BLM, the Black Lives Matter movement, as an example of radical democracy. I'd be the first one to tell you None of these examples are perfect. But again, I say to you, if you're searching for perfection, I don't know what to do with that. You know, human beings make mistakes, and we should leave some room for folks to be imperfect. There's a beauty in imperfection. I want to tag this section with one more example that I would be remiss if I did not include. So when we start talking about radical democracy and real action, my conscience compels me to raise up indigenous resistance movements from Turtle Island to the global South. They embody radical democracy through non-Western forms of governance that prioritize land, community, and intergenerational justice. Indigenous resistance movements. They serve as an incredible model for radical democracy. Well, y'all know I'm a realist. Sometimes people say I keep it a little too real, but that's okay. Radical democracy, as I've said before, is imperfect. There are some serious critiques and challenges, and I think that we should cover them. We should really be realistic about what it is that we're talking about. So let's not romanticize radical democracy. Faces some serious challenges. I'm going to pose some questions. These are some of the challenges. Can decentralized movements scale up without becoming bureaucratic? That's challenge number one. Challenge number two, does endless debate risk paralysis? That's number two. Number three, what happens when everyone has a say, but no one has responsibility? This is some of what I've struggled with and some of my community activism, right? So again, as much as I'm all for, and I am, radical democracy, there's some serious challenges. It's not perfect. We need to be real about it. Critics argue that radical democracy lacks the institutional teeth to make durable change. Defenders counter that those very institutions are what produce oppression. So you can see that there's this kind of cyclical thing going on here. This tension between idealism and pragmatism is at the heart of the radical democratic project. We need to be real about that. There are some serious critiques and challenges. It's not perfect. But even though radical democracy is not perfect, I still believe that there is a lot that we can learn from it, that we can learn with it. I believe that it's important for us to offer up some alternatives and be realistic about the world that we're living in today. And so why does radical democracy matter now? Why would I devote an entire episode to radical democracy? And what does it mean to radicalize democratic thought, democratic ideals, democratic politics? Well, one of the reasons I felt really strongly about doing this particular show is because I believe that we're living in an age of democratic crisis. We're living in an age of democratic crisis. From rising authoritarianism to declining trust in governments, people around the world are demanding new models of participation and power. This is key. Radical democracy offers tools for reimagining politics from the ground up. Participatory budgeting in cities like Porto Alegre and New York. Digital democracy platforms, right? Really important for us to embrace digital democracy platforms. And then mutual aid networks, which surged during the COVID-19 pandemic, showing how people organize without state direction. folks taking initiative. That's what it means to live in a truly democratic society. There's a kind of collectivity. There's a communal connection. So again, I challenge those people that are running around just saying beloved community, but they're actually not contributing to it. Talking about it and doing it are two different things. Again, none of these examples I've just come with, they're not perfect, but they're real. That's important to me. The realness part of radical democracy. It's not going to be easy. It's not going to be easy. Radical democracy asks us, what kind of world do we want and who gets to decide? All right, we've reached the part of the show where we have the poetic pause. And in keeping with the theme for today, radical democracy, I really want to build on Martin Luther King's conception, or one of his contributions to this discourse on radical democracy, where it's predicated on radical love and this whole notion of building a beloved community. Radical love. And part of that radical love is not simply loving yourself, because we absolutely need more of that. We need more people practicing self-love, but we also need that love to have a ripple effect around the world. That means going beyond your family, going beyond your community, going beyond your country. And we need some global love. And in that vein, bearing that in mind, here is an original poem of mine, and it's called Everybody Likes It When I Talk About Love. Now, this is one of my journal entries, so it might be a little rough, might be a little raggedy around the edges, but I believe you will be able to pick up on the sentiment. Everybody likes it when I talk about love. Everybody likes it when I talk about love, but very few like it when I love. Love is unconditional. Love is never ending. Sometimes love is a brutal truth that makes you cast doubts on whether it is love at all. Love is long-suffering, and in the same moment, love is short-tempered. Love is the water of a waterfall, and at the same time, love is the lava oozing out of a volcano. What is love? Or rather, what love? As Charles Mingus and Eric Dolphy used to play back in the day. Perhaps love is wanting for others what you cannot acquire for yourself. Love is there when married folks fight, and love is there when drunk lovers stumble home in the wee small hours of the night. Love is Harriet Tubman, leading her people to freedom. Love is Bob Marley, singing of redemption. Love is forever fighting so that we might today be free. Love is knowing that death, in a sense, is part of our destiny. But then again, love is knowing that death doesn't necessarily mean to die. Love is living on even after 1,000 tears have transpired and your friends and loved ones finally realize that it is only the body that expires. Everybody likes it when I talk about love, but few, very few, like it when I love. Woo. One of my favorite topics. Why, you may ask? Because there is so much hate in this world. We need more lovers and less haters, and we need the lovers to love on the haters, and maybe you can get them to stop the hateration. Stop hating and start appreciating. Ho! Yeah, this is it. Oh, it's all over now. Here we go. So, after this episode, You've heard this episode on radical democracy. I'm trying to raise your consciousness. I'm trying to use this podcast as a classroom. So what does it all mean? Radical democracy is not a blueprint. It is a horizon, a set of commitments, practices, and possibilities that push us beyond transactional politics and toward collective transformation. It reminds us that democracy is not a place we arrive at. It's something we practice every day in every space we inhabit. Now imagine that. Just meditate with me for a moment. Imagine if everybody practiced democracy every day and in every way they possibly can. That means out on your job, in your synagogue, in your church, in your mosque, in your spiritual temple. That means in your house with your partners and your kids and your loved ones. Democracy, right? And that everybody has a say. Power to the people. All the people, not just some of the people, but all the people, not the rich people, not the male people, not the straight people, but for all people. That's a radical democracy. Whole different conception of it. And a radical democracy, it's messy. It's contradictory. It's hard work. I want to go back to what Frederick Douglass said. This is really, really important. No struggle, there is no progress. But even after all of that, one of the things that resonates with me so much about this concept of radical democracy is that it's full of hope. Hope that we, the people, still have the power to imagine and create something better. We're talking about offering alternatives, the best of our art, the best of our intellectuals, the best of our doctors, the best of our pastors and preachers and imams and rabbis and monks. The best of them offer us alternative. They offer alternatives. They not only grapple with the world the way it is, they point us in a direction and let us know the way the world could be, the way it ought to be, the way it should be. This is really powerful. So here's our call to action. This week, look for the places in your life where democracy feels absent. In your workplace, in your neighborhood, in your classroom. Then ask, what would it mean to democratize this space? Talk to someone. Start a conversation. Attend a local assembly. Organize a meeting. Small actions grow. And that's where radical democracy begins. Because the future isn't something we inherit. It's something we assemble together. This is really important because that's how the Center for African and African American Studies was built. This was an idea when I came here from Los Angeles, California in 2005. It was just an idea, and it took a long time, but now that idea, we translated it into something concrete. So what began as a dream is now our reality. This is really powerful because that's how we build democracy. We've got to embrace our dreams, even in the midst of the nightmares that we're sometimes living through. Don't let go of your dreams. Hold on to them. Turn your dreams into reality. Talk to other people. Build with them. And then we also have to grapple with collective dreams. Our collective dreams. Not just individual, but collective dreams and the power of collective dreams. I got to get out of here. I got to let you go. Thanks for listening to the Cause Podcast. If you like this episode, share it, rate it, and most importantly, do something democratic today. Do something democratic every day. Embrace, let's radicalize democracy. Thank you so much for listening to the Cause Podcast. We have had an incredible episode today on radical democracy. We've got a lot more in store for you, so please stay tuned. We've got a lot of future episodes coming up with some really incredible topics. And we just appreciate you all for tuning in, for building beloved community with us, for taking on sometimes some challenging topics, some things that we really need right now, more of these things in the world and everything. And so, again, we just appreciate you all so much for listening. We have so much more in store, so continue to check us out wherever you're listening to the podcast. So anyway, until then, until the next episode, stay engaged, stay curious, and above all else, stay radical. Stay believing in radical democracy. Stay building radical democracy. That is the only way we're going to be able to build the beloved community, is through a commitment to radical democracy. Y'all take care. I'm out of here. Ho! Gotta go.
Thank you for joining us for the Cause Podcast with Dr. Reiland Rabaka. For your letters, questions, and suggestions regarding the podcast, email us, thecause@gmail.com. CAAAS. We may even read your letter on the air. The Cause Podcast with Dr. Reiland Rabaka is produced and edited by John Arnold and is a production of the Center for African and African American Studies, The Cause, at the University of Colorado Boulder. For more information, visit us online at colorado.edu/center/cause. CAAAS.
Class is in session, so come and get your lesson. Ooh, the Cause Podcast. I love that. Do you love that?